there.
All right. Well, welcome everybody who came tonight, and welcome everybody who's going to watch this at 1.5 speed on the recording later on. So tonight we're going to be talking about mammals in the Bosque. Next week we will do everything else in the Bosque, same time, same place. And as we already figured out, it's being recorded. It'll be available for view. Usually takes a couple days to get it recorded, and then I'll send out a link to everybody, and it's also will be available on the website, so you can find all the recordings there as they show up. And I do apologize for the kind of lecture format, but it's given what the amount of time we have and so forth, I think it's the only way to go, especially since so few people join as live participants. So what I'm going to do tonight is won't be an in-depth look at any particular track or sign of mammals, kind of a survey of the ones that I think I need to, based on experience, looking at all the things that have been done in the past in these evaluations. What's likely to happen? What are they likely to ask in terms of mammals? And kind of a survey of those so that you have some idea of what you might want to look at. We'll go through it briefly on some of them in a little more detail on those that they actually ask more detail on for a variety of reasons.
And we can stop and ask you questions, right?
Sure, absolutely. You can stop. I think tonight we have plenty of time. This isn't that long because there's just not that many mammals that are essential or that are frequently asked. So yeah, especially if I say something that doesn't make sense or you want clarification or I got something that's kind of not right, let me know. I'd really like to know more about a lot of this stuff. All right, so now I don't have control of my, there we go. Okay, so briefly what's coming up, October 6th, 2024, that's a Sunday, not a Saturday for the first time. We'll do a mock eval, Albuquerque Bosque at Tingley Beach. And if you're signed up for the eval and you want to practice, this is great. But even if you're not, you don't want to do an eval, you never have intended to, it's also a lot of fun and you'll learn a great deal because we don't score it. It's very low key. So it's actually a lot of fun. Then there'll be basically a half of a day of a prep day in Albuquerque on October 23rd on the Bosque, probably back at Tingley. And then October 24th, somewhere in the mountains. I won't know where we can go until I find out where Casey's going so that we can't go to those places. And then the two evals, one day in Santa Fe, October 25th, and 2-day here, 26th and 27th in Albuquerque. Yeah, it's not working for some reason. Okay. So let's start with what we won't be seeing. And some of you saw this last year, won't be exactly news to you, but so these are some animals absolutely won't see, but a lot of them are potential, but they're so rarely seen in the Bosque. I would really put it on a very low probability if I saw a track that I thought I'd match them. So far left corner, I don't know if you guys can see the cursor or not, it's blue. So this is feral hogs. They are in New Mexico, but not in the Bosque and not anywhere near us, and far closer to Texas than to Albuquerque. So if you see hooves, it's not a feral hog. It might be something else, but it's not him. There are no armadillos here.
Wait, Mike, back to the feral hog.
Yeah.
There, down in the Bosque, there was a javelina.
Right, but the hogs are huge. So the difference is dramatic. A hog track would be the size of a deer, but bigger, whereas the javelina is about a third of that. So, and the other thing is hogs, they just wreak havoc. They go in and root up whole areas. It looks like a rototiller went through. And that hasn't happened. If there were hogs in the Bosque, we'd probably know. It'd be hard to miss them. And they're horribly invasive, so we're lucky they're not here. So let's see. Armadillos not here. This bottom corner here. This is a nutria, kind of halfway between a muskrat and a beaver. They do live in New Mexico, but down more like near Ruidoso. There's a colony there. The only one I could find in New Mexico. That one apparently was actually released there on purpose at some point. So not in our Bosque, not yet. They may show up someday, but they haven't. Apparently they like warmer weather than we have. All right, then opossum, not here. If you think you see one, it's possible. They have been sighted, but very seldom. And I've always felt like maybe they hitched a truck ride or something from Arkansas. But they don't live here naturally, and I've never seen a track or any sign of them. And then the river otter, northern river otter, they're getting close. Latest sighting is up by Santa Fe. Still haven't made it down to here. I would love to see a track. I hope to see one someday, but I do not expect to see them in any of these evals. Although it's not impossible that one could show up, but I would be surprised. Same with mountain lion. They do hang out. They pass through. They don't live there. Every year, there's a few mountain lion sightings in Albuquerque, especially up in the heights. But they pass through the river, but they only spend a day or two because there's too many people for them. So I've never seen a track or scat or anything like that. I would be really surprised to see one, but it's not impossible. Especially late October, they might move back through. I don't know how they decide where they want to go. So if you see a track that looks like a bobcat, nothing else, or a mountain lion looks like a mountain lion, it is, just be really skeptical of it. And this, the little chipmunk here, they just don't seem to live in the Bosque. Never, they live pretty close, and they live in places that are kind of off the Bosque where more people are living. But I've never seen them in the Bosque, and I've never seen tracks for them, and I've never seen anybody that thought they'd seen any down there. In the mountains, chipmunks, yeah, sure. But once we're in the Bosque, I'm not going to be worried about them. Same with black bears. They pass through a lot more regularly even than mountain lions, because they're on their way from our mountains over to maybe the other mountains to the west. They do pass through. They get seen. They usually are pretty obvious. It's not impossible, but never seen a bear track, and more importantly, I've never seen bear scat, which would be impossible to miss. Same with deer. They passed through a couple of years ago. They showed up on cameras, but they don't stay. It's just too populous for them. Too many people for them. So if you see what you think is a deer track, once again, be really, really skeptical of it. But if it is, it is. So don't take it off your list. And this little guy here, this is a vole. They don't really live in the Bosque. They live really close to the Bosque. You can go, 500 yards away in nice green grass, and they live there. But the Bosque does not seem to be their hangout. We'll talk a little later about somebody who's kind of taken that niche, a hispid cotton rat. But so I don't look for them up in the mountains. Absolutely, they can be up there. There's a lot of them. Same with this kangaroo rat. Now they live all around the Bosque, but they need desert. And there are places that are within sight of the Bosque where they can be found, but it's getting harder and harder to find public property on which they live. So I haven't had any luck the last couple of years, and we may not be able to this year either. But if it comes up, you'll know you're in their terrain, because they dig holes like crazy, tracks everywhere. It's undeniably K-rat land, but it's desert, and the Bosque is not desert enough for them, yes. Then the western spotted skunk. Technically, they could be down there. I've never seen one, never seen a track there. They don't show up on the game cameras down there much. In the mountains, sure, but even there, they're kind of rare. And I've only seen one track in the mountains. I could say absolutely, yeah, that's a western spotted. And then least weasel. I'm sorry, long-tailed weasel. This guy down here. They live in the Bosque. I have seen them in the Bosque. I don't think I've ever seen the track though. There's not a lot of them. They're very secretive. And I just haven't run across it, and I haven't seen anyone else do that. So if you see something, you know what a weasel track looks like, I don't know, you probably have them where you live, right, Wayne?
I'm not familiar with them. No,
Okay.
not around here.
And like I said, they're there, and they do live there. I ran across one time. I spooked them out of a bush, but they're so rare, the tracks never seem to show up. It could be they just don't go into the kind of areas where I'm tracking. I think they like to live in the bushes and hunt in there. So these are animals I'm not expecting. I'm not going to worry about them unless some kind of weird thing happens. But these are the ones that I am going to worry about. And this is from the list that's already up on the website under resources. This is just the mammals off that list. So that's not too bad. It looks like a lot, but really the left side is the main, especially the top of that list: beaver, raccoon, porcupine, coyote, dog. That's where they get most of their tracks. You get to the other side, yeah, you might see some of those, but they're much rarer. So I would focus, if I was just going to focus on anything, I'd look at the beginning of this list, which is where we're going to start. We'll look hard at beaver, the most the most productive of all the animals in terms of creating track and sign. Impossible to miss. They always use some beaver stuff, sometimes more than one. In fact, they seem to be the number one animal for, in terms of, if you know your beaver sign and track, you're going to be in pretty good shape. And there's a track to the right. I've never seen a lot of them. That's a really exceptionally good track. They're a lot more likely to look like this. There's a couple beaver tracks, kind of indistinct. They don't leave a lot of tracks because they're in the water so much, and they also kind of drag their own tracks into oblivion with their tail and whatever they're dragging behind them. But there are tracks, and they like them. They find, and the evaluators, Casey, this is one on the left. It's one I found. The one on the right is the one that was actually in the evaluation last fall. And it's a beaver track, but it took some work to convince myself I knew what I was looking at. Let's see. A lot more likely is sign, because they just do so much work. Tracks are rare, their sign is everywhere. So this is a pile of beaver cut sticks, and you can see little 45s here on ends, little striations, kind of hard to see. We'll get a better picture. So these piles are just them, and I don't know. Some of them are clearly washed up by the river. Some almost look like they made a pile of their own, because they're not necessarily in the river, but they're absolutely everywhere. So the last eval I did down there, we got a stick. This isn't it, but it looked like this. It's a stick in the middle of the river in the sandbar. The question is, who cut it? And the answer was beaver, although it was small enough it could have been something else. Porcupines don't really do this much, but if you look here, you can see there's 45s on either end. Some little teeth marks, which are kind of hard to read. It's hard to say how big a beaver's tooth mark should be. But if you look at the end, it's got striations. Those are harder to see. I've got a better picture here. This is the key. Porcupines do not do this. This is what a beaver looks like. That's their teeth. They turn their head sideways. Here's a picture of how they do it. So you can see why you get this kind of stripy thing going cross angle, because that's how they cut through everything. You see that? That's beaver. There's no other animal that's going to do that down there. It also helps you distinguish a human cut from a beaver cut, because they do a lot of work down there and cut a lot of things, and it looks kind of beaverish. But if you don't see that on it, then it's not by them. And that is a pretty common sign for them to show you somewhere, somehow. All right. Let's see. These are beaver drags. They make these to drag their branches more easily into the water. And sometimes they're really developed, like this one on the left side, which is actually one that was in an evaluation a few years ago. It's actually been excavated pretty carefully and allowed to fill with a little water to make it easier. Then they actually kind of trim the sides in here so that things don't get stuck. This one's not as well made, but it's still pretty deep, and everything's trimmed along here. See that, trimming all that stuff there so they don't get hung up. These are pretty common, not hard to find. I would say the answer to this is a beaver drag. Let's see. All right, this one they ask a lot. It's a tail drag. You can tell it's a tail. This curvy thing here is the tail actually dropping for a moment into the sand. There's another one over here. This does not always happen, but in the last eval I did, that we had one that had one or two of these, so it's pretty easy. You can also tell by the width. I think it's about 8 inches wide. I'm not sure, but pretty wide. A lot of times this obscures their tracks, so all you see is this. Like here, I think that might be a track, but that's about the only one that really shows up. The rest of them they were here, but this tail is just so wide and heavy, it kind of wipes them out as it goes. We got this last time around. It's a brush drag, and this one was dropped. I don't know what happened partway through. But they can be found anywhere in the Bosque, in the forest, deep in the forest. The one last year was in the middle of the forest, but it looked like this. It was just sitting on across the trail, actually, and so that they are often on sandbars, and then you get this look, and this is very common. So you have the tail drag. This one doesn't have the little circles, does it? Because he's not stopping, but same kind of very regular, very similar distance. There's a foot track, very calm, and it's got the same pattern all the way through. See that little divot there? The branch going the opposite way because they go out, they drag their tail on the way back. The branch drag skewers everything, tail drag everything. And the branch drag much wider, kind of chaotic color, or lots of this and that in there. And it's not uncommon to see them paired like this because they use the same path to go out as they do to come back from work. And you might find a dozen of these on some of the nice sandbars down there. And this year, late October, there should be some really, really nice sandbars. All right. So these are scent mounds, different sizes. They're everywhere. I did not realize what I was looking at for many years until someone pointed them out to me. They come in all sizes, all shapes, and all kinds of places. They all have some things in common. There's always mud. There's almost always sticks. They're usually near the water, but they can come in any size. Like the one on the left up here, that's about 8 inches across. It's first thing in the morning. It looks like a beaver got started and then the sun came up, so he left. The one below it is more common. This is about 18 inches across, maybe 6 inches tall. There's the river. Fresh. This is fresh mud right here. This has just been made. And then here's an old one. Sherry's standing next to it. That's really tall and wide. This thing has been worked on and worked on. And what they do, they make the pile, then they use their glands and their butt to leave scent on it. They're marking territory usually for other beavers. But they don't have to be near the river. This one right here is far from the river because the river goes up and down. And so the bank changes. And each time the bank recedes or moves into gets larger, they have to go and make a new set because now they have new boundaries that they have to create. So this one, the big one down here is probably 150 yards from the river. But at some point the river was up here, so they had to make that as a barrier for the other beavers. And this is a mud drag. This is just collecting mud for those piles. This is near the river. It's hard to see in this picture, but if you look real carefully, you can actually see 3 fingers. It's usually 3 that they're using, or 4, and they collect it, hold it to their chest, and they walk over and use it and put it on whatever they're needing to. And then this, let me see, Sherry can tell us more about this. This is the beavers collecting as well, right, Sherry? Hello, Sherry? Yeah, maybe she can't hear me. Anybody else hear me?
No, I hear you. I hear you. I just couldn't unmute in time. I couldn't find my arrow to unmute. What Casey said, this was beavers digging mud out. And they just go into the across the bank and scratch away at the bank.
And I've thought this might be that. I've seen it in a lot of places. Usually the river's really close. They don't want the sand, so they go past that to find the mud and carry it off. But it looks like they've done a lot of work right there. All right. All right. Now this, they haven't asked, but they could, and I'm wouldn't be surprised if it happened. Beavers in the Bosque don't really make a lot of dams because you can't dam the Rio Grande. But in the drainage ditches and so forth that parallel it, they can. Not really effective. They don't make ponds and build their homes in there, but they can build them like this one on the left. This is built every year. This is Bosque School right here. This is built in the drainage ditch. They build it, and every year as the water raises and falls, it gets washed out. They go back and build it again the next year. Whereas this one here, this is by the Alameda Bridge, and we were actually within about 100 yards of this thing, right down below us here, where one of the beavers had done a drag. And so, but this one is more earthen. So they're actually out there, and I see them fairly common if you look in the right places. So it wouldn't be that hard for them to find a beaver dam to show you. And here, that's a classic kind of beaver den. It's not in the water; it's next to the water in one of the ponds, and it's huge. And there's a lot of beavers in there. We see them coming and going, but it's uncommon in the Bosque. There's not enough still water for them. They don't really make ponds. So this one is at one of the large ponds, and that's continually fed so they can live there. They build this. More common is this, a lot more common. So the water had been high enough to cover this, and then the river shifted and exposed it. So that is a classic beaver den home entrance. And it's pretty big. I'll show you here in a minute how big. There we go. So that's a teenage boy in one. He was kind of showing off. So he fits easily into a beaver den tunnel there. And then onto the right, you don't often see the entrance like that, but these collapsed beaver tunnels are everywhere. They're always large, and they point at the river like that. And the entrance, of course, would be under here, under the water. They tunnel up here, and they often have them going in different directions over here. But when they collapse, this is a huge hole. We have a little dog that can just jump right in that thing because it's deep and it's wide. Nothing else looks like that. All right. See how we're doing. All right, beaver scat. Not easy to find. They poop in the water. The most common place to find it, apparently it floats because it will wash up into eddies and backwaters, places where things collect. So this is like that. It's behind a big fallen tree in the middle of the side of the river where the water slackened. And there were probably 20 or 30 of these in that spot because they'd all washed down from where the beavers were working. But if very seldom find fresh and very seldom find on the edge of the river. It's usually just washed up like this. And this is another character that has so much that they always do something with porcupines. It's just inevitable. And so here's a good track. They don't usually have them this good, but I wanted everyone to see this pattern is diagnostic. You see that as a porcupine, and it looks like a basketball for the same reason. This is the part of the foot that they use to grab branches. It bends, and they can just hold onto the branch, very thin branches, and hang on tight. And so this is a good one. You can see these are the quills dragging behind. There's the foot. Don't really see good claws on it, but you can see here's a better one. There's some claws. There's the pattern, and here's the tail drag. Now sometimes this is all you see. The tracks just won't show up for whatever reason. And sometimes there is no tail drag with the tracks. Apparently some don't drag their tail, or not all the time in any event. So I would expect, and what they will often do is, you won't have this, but they might have a little bit of it like that. That's all they'll show you. And the answer to that is porcupine. This is what their eating looks like. It's completely different from beavers. It's very delicate. You can see all these little back and forth. And they don't cut into the wood. They're stripping the bark off and then eating the cambium underneath. And this is solid wood. So they don't really get it. They're very, very good at just getting that. And they could be anywhere on a tree. They could be 100 feet up or at the ground level. It's just.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah.
Peter Callan here. What do you think is the width normally on the tail drag of the porcupine?
Why do they lift? I don't know.
The width.
Oh, the width? It's actually pretty narrow. I would say 3 or 4 inches, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Much narrower than the beaver tail drag.
Whereas the beaver's like 8 inches.
Yeah, but the thing is, they come in. I saw tracks a couple days ago for a little tiny one, and it had a tail drag, but it was a little tiny tail drag. So it's more the pattern. It's like that. It's that sachet back and forth because they waddle, and looks like kind of a broom, a rough broom has been drug along, and it goes back and forth and back and forth. And I think you could, even without any tracks at all, you could look at that and go, that's porcupine. Because nothing else looks like that, I don't think. All right, so this can be anywhere. Like I said, sometimes they eat it all the way to the ground, and that they'll often pick that because then maybe it's harder to tell, is that a beaver or is that a porcupine? But it just doesn't look like beaver to me. I mean, they do a lot of damage when they go into a tree for whatever reason, whereas these guys don't leave much. They leave all the tree behind, as far as I can tell. And beaver or porcupine scat is everywhere in the bosque. It's just on the ground, all under a lot of trees. If you look, you can see it. It is like you can tell this is kind of falling apart. It is a little pill of sawdust because that's what they eat. So they can be connected. I don't see any here, but they can be they can be connected. They can have little ends like that, or they can just be a kind of a capsule. Mostly this is what you see, but there's a lot of it. And the way that I think they find them is this. This is one way you can double check yourself. Come on. All right. So here's some on it. This is a log laying on the ground. So I'm shooting straight down looking at it. And these are kind of, they don't look, they're porcupine-ish, but there's not a lot of them. And I just look straight up and there he is. And in a lot of the evals, when I find this, I look up and there they are. And I think what they do is that instead of crawling through the forest looking for these, they just spot the animal in the trees and look underneath. And so if you want to really nail it down tight, yeah, that's definitely porcupine. Look up, you might just see who's been leaving it. And they have a tendency to hang out in the same place for a while. So there's often a lot down there. All right, now bobcat shows up. I haven't seen it as often because bobcats there aren't as many and there's not as many good tracks from them. But nothing else looks like a bobcat. You know, it's a beautiful feline track. This is a good one, usually not this good. Big, beautiful pad. It's got the 3 lobes down here and kind of 2. Teardrop toes, lots of space between all the toes and the pad, and it's big. So it's a couple inches wide. Yeah, when you find them, they're great, but I'll seldom come up in an eval in my experience, at least in the Bosque. More common though is going to be the scat, and this is an aged one, so it's turned white. But when they're new, they look like Tootsie Rolls, same size and shape, often shiny. Unfortunately, you can't poke it in the eval because as soon as you poke it, you know what it is. But it's kind of a characteristic look. They sometimes have a ball and socket. One end is a socket, the other is a ball that fits into it. If you find that, you know you've got a bobcat. And this is going to be placed very prominently, often on the trail for sure, and often at intersections on the trail, like they're staking their territory. So it's easier to find bobcat scat than it is to find bobcat tracks, I think. And here's one that you may come up. This is a little tough one for me sometimes. So bobcat versus house cat. You look at it, you go, yep, that's a cat. And then which is it? Size is the first thing. These two are actually pretty proportional to each other in the picture, but I can cover a house cat track with my thumb. Pretty much it hides the whole thing. I can only cover maybe half of this with my thumb. Then there's some other issues. Kind of round, maybe oval. These are teardrop, beautiful teardrops. They're just kind of crowded together. Look at you got this great space. And the house cats usually just seem to have this kind of blobby palm pad, whereas these guys can be very well defined. They've got a lot of weight on that, I guess. And so that often shows up. What can be tough, I think I've got one to show you someday, Peter. It's that size, but it looks exactly like that. So I guess you could have a small bobcat that would be tough. But usually it's a house cat. Come on now. All right. Coyotes, every eval, 2 or 3 question coyote related. They're just everywhere. All over the US, every place we've gotten coyote questions. So we got the classic track over here. Nice, that's a butte. Seldom seen that nice, but nice oval, tight toes pointing forward, little tiny pinprick toes, minimal pad, about 3 inches long. Boom. That's a bobcat or a coyote. This is their scat, always available. There's no way you could do an eval without finding some, whether they use it or not, but it's always out there. They leave it everywhere. And it's just kind of twisted, ropey a little bit. It can take other shapes, it can be a little bit of a splat, depends what they're eating. But it's usually filled with a variety of food because they eat everything and then they leave it. So, and then they put it in the trail just like the bobcat. You'll find it where they want you to, where you will be easiest to see, and often also at an intersection or in a high spot. They like high spots. And this is one I've gotten in every eval. Is it a dog or is it a coyote? And there are some dogs that are the same size as the coyote, so it's really tough. And there are some dogs that are closer to a coyote. So this one is kind of close, but not exactly. So that we've got a lot more splay. These feet aren't these aren't as tight. A lot more room here. Giant claws, just huge claws that leave a big mark. These are just tiny, and they may not even show up, but in a domestic dog, they're huge, and they have lot bigger kind of sloppy toes. This isn't as big, but often you'll have a huge pad with a lot of weight on it. And then, so these two are very different, but I've had problems with this. And I think my mistake, which I'm trying not to do anymore, is I would look at the track they wanted me to look at, and I wouldn't look at the rest in the line. And sometimes up and down, you will find one that answers your question, coyote or dog. You'll find a better track. They often find the one that's kind of on the line almost, so that you have to really use your skill to tell them apart. And of course, the dogs are going to be meandering all over unless they're walking with an adult or with a human being, whereas the coyotes are very purposeful and very direct kind of line looking for food.
And you've got one of Kim Cabrera's worksheets on dog versus
Oh
coyote
yeah, thanks. I forgot.
on the website, and that's really good.
Yeah, they're on the website. She's done the best dog versus coyote worksheet. It's one page. It's got everything on it. If you know that worksheet, you will never get messed up on this. And there's another one that we'll talk about when we get to the mountains, but her stuff is just phenomenal. And there's often, I haven't looked lately, but often she'll have videos as well, like going through this kind of thing. So she's a terrific source. This I haven't seen an eval, but if they find it, they'll show it to you. I've seen them in other places, but not here.
It was in our last eval.
What, did you have one?
Yeah, I can't remember.
How cool.
Yeah, it was this. It was just like this.
And it was a coyote den.
Like the one on the left. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Where did you find it?
It was just down where we did the eval. I can't even.
On the river?
Yeah, it was on the river.
Okay. And this one's, yeah.
We were, yeah. It was close
so
to the river. It wasn't on it.
This is a Jonah Evans. He's terrific. But this is one I found down there. Nothing else looks like him. Tall, wide, coyote-shaped hull. Huge throw piles. There's a lot of tunnel in there. This one I'm pretty sure was there was a den with pups in there, because the tracks coming out of were just in every direction. There was huge amount of tracks going in every direction. The adults going out, back and back feeding. So yeah, I didn't realize you'd seen one. Sure, that's cool. Obviously, all right. Come on. Haven't seen this on an eval. They're hard to find. Muskrats are all over the Bosque, but they don't walk around much. They swim everywhere.
Michael, I got a question.
Yeah.
So I didn't notice if you had, excuse me, gray fox on there for the Bosque. I didn't notice it in the I
don't remember if I got it on there. I'd have to look at the list to see if they showed up. If it's not on the list, I didn't put it on. And although there's lots of gray fox tracks, I haven't seen one on an eval.
Okay, because that years ago anyway, that Casey would love to put those in, and I noticed that I didn't see it on your list of animals that you wouldn't find in the Bosque, but yeah, I would think that they're kind of ubiquitous, kind of like coyote. And when you were talking about the scat in the trails, that's where I was thinking you usually see fox scat, very prominently.
And I don't know, I'll look at that, Peter. But I just haven't seen it. I know if they found it, they'd do it. They definitely put it on eval if they could find it. But I just don't see it as often as I do like coyote.
Yeah. Maybe in the mountain, when you go in the mountains, they'll be more, I know like around Cedro Peak and Tejeras and that part, there's fox is pretty common.
We
Yeah,
we
and-
we have found fox down on the Bosque though.
Oh
right?
yeah, we found it. It's not we have to look to find it. It's not easy like the coyote you find right away, but you have to kind of work a little bit to get fox, but there's usually some.
Yeah.
Under bridges is the best place because they're kind of delicate tracks. They don't last long unless it's in mud. And we see them up in the mountains. If you get a good substrate, there's a lot more foxes, I think, working up there.
Yeah, and if there are tracks or a trail, it can be very confusing if you're trying to make it into a coyote because it's just like not.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it's
Right.
easy. I mean, a coyote track is the length of my finger, the 3 joints of my index finger, and a fox at the first 2 only.
Yeah.
So size should fix that. I have a harder problem differentiating a fox track from a house cat.
Right. Yeah.
They're the same size, and that is a lot
Between,
tougher. And a lot of times their semi-retractable claws don't show at all.
between the coyote, the fox, and the house cat, it can be kind of confusing.
Yeah, I'd love to see one on an eval. I think if they find it, they'll definitely turn you loose on it. All right, but this one can't be found a lot more easily. This is a muskrat poop. Small, I don't know, maybe a ½ inch. Always near the water. Like this is within a foot of the water, probably. This was on an eval years ago. I did. So if you're near the water, especially if it's like one of the ditches, they love the ditches. That's where they hang out. And you see this. That's probably muskrat. So the only thing that even looks remotely like it is turtle scat, but it's not nearly as like widespread and carefully positioned. And I don't know, there may not be a lot of turtles by late October to do that. Now this is a little weird. He hasn't asked this, but he could because it's right there. This is on one of the this is on the dam or on one of the islands in the Tingley, near Tingley. It's an island inside of a small pond, and both beaver and muskrat live in here together. Apparently, they share sometimes.
Huh.
And I've seen both of them come and go from this, so it's possible to find either one.
So which one is the muskrat? Is
This
it
is
the front one?
The muskrat is on the right, and the beaver's on the left. The size difference is dramatic.
And
Right,
the
but
tails. The muskrat
tail is
has a
different.
rat tail and the
Yeah.
beaver has a flat tail.
but I'm talking about their den,
Yeah, this
The-
is
you know, the-
it's not a classic den at all.
right? But is one is a muskrat and one is a beaver, or together,
sharing.
they're totally together sharing?
Yeah. There is a family of beavers was raised here because I saw the little ones come out, and then I see the muskrats come out of the same place.
But what does a regular muskrat, where does it generally stay? Does it make a hole in the side of the river of the
Yeah,
banks like
but
a
they're really hard to
beaver, or
find.
what?
They make a hole and it's smaller, and I think if it's underwater, maybe that's why I can't find it. But I just haven't had much luck finding them. But they do like they call this a raft. They will make a collection of stuff like this, and they will sit on here and eat. So I haven't seen them do that, but apparently that's a possibility too. But finding muskrat homes, man, I haven't had much luck with that. Have you had any luck with that, Peter?
I'm remembering one near the Alameda Bridge that where there was a muskrat tunnel, and yeah, they're just narrower, and they usually make a little hole, up on the bank, either for air. I don't think they get out there. It's like an air hole or something.
Ventilation.
Yeah, ventilation hole.
Yeah, and I've seen those, and sometimes I don't know if that's one of them or not. I haven't found. I don't know of a good way to say, yeah, that's a muskrat. But I think that was asked on one evaluation, the very first one I did. I had no clue. All right, now these guys, raccoon, they don't leave a lot of sign. At least I haven't seen it. But boy, their tracks are everywhere. The evaluators like to use them for a number of reasons. One is they're plentiful, so they can find what they want. And the other reason is they are really good if they want to ask front, hind, left, right questions. Some animals are hard. I can't tell the difference left and right on a coyote if I have one track. But with raccoons, you can. So here we have, I just took this last week, I think. So here we have left hind and front right. And when you have a good track, it's easy because the hind looks like your foot kind of. Nice big pad back here, and there's a low toe on the inside and 4 toes. The front is a little harder sometimes, but it's like a hand with 5 fingers instead of 4 and a thumb. No thumb, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fingers, and a vastly reduced pad. And often you get this nice little C here, and here's another, and often you won't see the rest of this. So front and hind aren't too bad. Right and left, low toe on the inside on the back. So this is the animal, that's the left. This one's harder. I looking at this, I'm having a hard time just saying that's a right, but I know because it's next to the left. And we'll talk about that in a second. So the nice thing about these, if you can, there's almost always a series of them. And if you can look at the series, you can usually puzzle it out, even if the tracks aren't complete. Like a lot of times you don't get this or whatever. But we'll go into that in a lot more detail because this one they ask every time. I've never done an eval where raccoons are available or we didn't spend a lot of time puzzling these guys out. And here's a better example of what I'm talking about. This is so right hind, low toe in the middle. This is a tough. There's an angle there, but it doesn't always work out. Depends how they step. Another feature that sometimes work heavier here on the outside, more weight. Doesn't always work though. So front and hind are easy, left and right a little tougher, but there's a way to do it usually. The problem is that I've heard from several of the evaluators that raccoons are the great pretender because their tracks look like everything else. So when I first started tracking, I would find this and I would send a picture to Peter and say, is this a bobcat? Because they're in all sizes. Raccoons come in all sizes. And he would say, no, that's a raccoon. And it's not a classic raccoon. That they don't have the long toes. You don't get a lot of pad here to tell you what's going on. But if you had both of them, you can tell. And I think that's the little toe there, that blue arrow. I think that's the inside toe. This is the hind, this is the front. But if all you had was this, and a lot of times that's it, they just look like other things. So I think the key here is to just look for more. Because one may look like this, but if you can find another one, that'll tell you who it is. And if you can find a series of it, it'll tell you which front and back, etc. it is as well. Even if the track is kind of deceptive, it fits in the pattern. And this is the pattern. Very unique, front, hind, hind, front, hind, front, paired more or less. And this is a unique, it's called a 2x2 or a pace track. Very rare in the animal kingdom because of the weird way these guys walk. So if you get one of these, maybe they show you this track. We'll go down here and look at that one. That'll tell you a lot if you know this pattern. This is the front. You go look at the front. Once you get that, it's pretty easy to puzzle that out. And this is what happens. This is why it looks so weird. Raccoons carry both legs on one side of the body forward at the same time. See, here we are, right side, both going forward. Almost no other animals do that. They alternate. It would be this going forward and this going forward. And then these two would go. So this weird pace thing means that the 2 feet are like this, down here in the blue square, side by side. That's when you get that. And it makes for that weird side-by-side pattern that just repeats endlessly. But I found this last week. Here's a raccoon walking. It's going really slow. That's a very short stride, but he's because they can walk and they can bound. The 2x2 is really common. I'd say 95% of the time, but here's one that's a walk. So undoubtedly raccoon, but it's not in the pattern. So that would be a tough one if you didn't have good track detail anyway. All right, better pick up the pace here and see where. All right, well, this is I don't expect to see this. Raccoon scat is hard to find. They do not display it. They put it under a tree or out of the way. And they probably won't ask you about it because it can have a horrible disease when it's dry, this raccoon roundworm thing. So, and I've had a hard time finding any raccoon scat that I could say with 100% certainty. Yep, that's a raccoon. All right, let's see what else is next here. Oh yeah, badgers, a lot of badger tracks. And they are wonderful, one of my favorites. So here, this is from an eval last spring, or last fall, who and front or hind. And if you look at this little fellow over here, front track, front paws, huge claws, absolutely huge. And here they are. And they almost don't touch underneath. There's a gap underneath there when they walk. Sometimes all you'll see is around 3 of these or 4. There's actually 5. So they have 5 in the front, 5 in the back. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th one's not showing on this. So nothing else looks like this. It looks like a little bear, kind of, they say. And the back does not have the long claws. So it's got to be a badger with that configuration size, front or hind. That has to be front because the digging claws are in the front, and those are huge diggers. And this is the other thing they tell you, even if it's not a great track, they walk in a really weird way because they're so low to the ground and so wide. They walk kind of like a lizard almost, with the toes, feet pointed in, and you get this bizarre kind of zigzag thing. This is wide open, so they can walk any way they want, and so that is kind of badgerish. So even if you're looking at tracks that aren't great, if you can kind of see a little zigzag like that, that's kind of indicative of a badger too. But those badger tracks are not easy to find, but badger holes are. Every time they can find it. If you look for 10 minutes, you'll find them, if you look in the right place. So this is classic, large D shape, flat bottom. And over here where this arrow is pointing, claw marks. Because a badger can turn its wrists 180 degrees and actually dig to the side and even above. And no dog can do that. No other animal that can make this big has that capability. And they dig a lot of them. They may not only spend a night or 2 in them. Usually if you find one, you look around, you'll find 2 or 3 more, like in the vicinity. Softer, especially if there's a little bit of a kind of an angle to the ground so that they don't have to dig straight down. But they're everywhere. And they often have a huge, huge throw pile. So here's the hole. Here's my walking stick. It's about 3 feet long. So this is about 6 feet across. Because they're such incredible diggers, this is the easiest way to find them. You just look for these giant throw piles, and then there's this little hole up here at the top. All right. See, striped skunk. Don't see them all the time, but they're everywhere. Saw them last time. They have the unique 5 and 5. No rodent has that. Size-wise, you can cover this part with your thumb almost perfectly with the claws showing. So that gives you the size. Weird, these toes are fused together. They cannot splay, so you get that. That's tight. And then you get that same super long claws because they also dig for a living. So they're on the front foot, just like the badger, and they are way the hell out here, right? Behind foot, much smaller and much tighter. And then if you get lucky, you'll see this crease right here. And these are pretty easy to find, but I haven't seen them on all the evals. But anything about this size, I would definitely entertain it. And they often lope, which is a kind of pattern we talked about last week, but it's not a bound, it's not a walk, it's a kind of a 4-foot pattern that they just seem to prefer. So if you see that helps a lot. Gray rock squirrel, a lot of them everywhere. Bosque to the top of the crest, anywhere they can, they live. They don't like deep forest, but almost anything else, especially if there's rocks or dead, lots of open space. And this is pretty close to the size of a skunk, so it can be a little challenging, but they only have 4 toes on the front. They have 5 on the back. That kind of looks skunkish, but the front is very different. You have these pads that are kind of often distinct, 4 pads, distinct curve, very curved. That has to do with the digging process, I think. So they're about the same, and they often bound because they're a squirrel. So this is the bound that they have. One, they're not like right in front of. They're not one after another like a rabbit would be one here, and this back one could be up here closer, and then these are the rears up. And they're around. They're under bridges, especially. They're very common. And this is also one of the easiest things to find in the Bosque. They're holes. There's 2 of them. They can be any size or shape. There's no characteristic size. They just kind of dig and dig and dig. They do a lot of digging. They can make really big, kind of spacious, multi-hole, multi-entrance things. Lots of throw dirt. They also are like dig for a living, so there's lots of dirt. And there's often, I find a cap like this, something that protects the roof, makes it hard to dig them out, I guess. So this is looks like part of this tree, fallen log, a piece of rock, almost anything. If they can find something to dig under like that, they often will. Here's one from eval. So they got a little stick over here, but there's no definitive shape. It's just about that big with a large throw pile, and there's lots and lots of them. Let's see, rats. Not every eval, but boy, if you want them, you'll find them under the bridges. You got rat tracks. You can kind of see the size, and these are kind of unique. These toes go almost out at a 180-degree angle. Very unique for that. And they look like spears. Some people say spear points. That is very characteristic of a rat. But we now have, white-throated wood. Yeah, well, a lot of wood rats. If you look, you'll find them. A pack rat, another name for them. Fat little toes. Very fat little toes. See how they are? Spread out. Claws often don't show. Very small. It's only 3/4 of an inch big. And if you find one track, you often find many tracks because they have a tendency to run around and retrace their steps in the same place. And then deer or white-footed mouse, hard to find. But they found them last time I was there, and the answer to this question was just mouse. They don't ask for more differentiation because it's really hard to tell what kind of mouse it is. But they're tiny. This is a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch. So this whole track is about a 1/2 inch square with little tiny toes and not much detail. You need really good substrate to find these because they're so light. They won't leave anything. And they often travel right next to walls or other protection. So tiny little tracks right next to a wall, I would start thinking mouse. All right, come on. There we go. Okay. Pocket gopher. Yeah, he's next. They live everywhere. Top of the crest, Bosque, make piles like this. Now I'm having some problems here. Okay. We may have to skip Boda pocket gopher. I think you guys know that one though anyway. But this is new. This is in the last few years. Javelina, this guy, has moved into the Bosque. They actually got this picture of the Bosque school. They have cameras, and we found these tracks a couple years ago under a bridge at Montano, and they're unique. They're just tiny little hoofs. You can see how small they are here. And then they're much smaller animals, so they don't go in as deep. And this is a wallow because they are pigs, kind of. And so this is probably about 2 by 3, I think. If you look, you can see fur marks in this where they lay down. There's only one that we know of. Apparently, bachelors sometimes will take off on their own. Usually, there's dozens of them in a group. This seems to be the lone peccary. Didn't see him last year, but I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up again. Oh, here we go. I skipped him. So Boda pocket gopher, big hole often where they plug it. So you can almost see a little circle there. That's the plug. This is what it looks like before they plug it. When they're done, they just shove a perfect plug into that and move on to their next tunnel. Pretty hard to miss. Anywhere we go, if they want to do this, they can. It's an easy question, but if they're looking for something, this is a good one to do. All right. This is another one they can do anytime they want. They did it this last year. Or bat under bridges, often you'll see a stripe like this. If there's a gap in the bridge up above running along with the roadway, they'll move into the gap, and they just produce so much guano, and it drops on the ground. You get this. Sometimes it may just be a circle of it, or like a diffuse carpet of it. And this is it. It's so much of it. It's just covering the ground. Looks like this. And this is it up close. Kind of irregular little, it doesn't look like other rodents. It just doesn't seem to have any real consistent form, but it's absolutely easy to tell the difference. If you crush it, it crushes into sand, feels just like sand. And in the sun, there will be glitter spots in here from every little insect part that's shiny that they ate. So they asked us this year. Unfortunately, we had a guy show us exactly how this worked before. But this one's, every bridge on the river, as far as I can tell, has some kind of bat living on it, some kind of bat groups on it. And this is rare now. We were talking about this before we started. Hemorrhagic fever wiped out most of the bunnies in the Bosque a couple years ago. Used to be there were tracks, countless tracks everywhere. There were so many, you could find them effortlessly. I haven't really seen any in the last year, probably. I've started seeing a couple more rabbits kind of hiding in the bushes and stuff, but still not a lot of tracks. But they're unique. They've got this Y thing, one front, hind. That's pretty much how they move. They can gallop, I guess, but I've never seen it. Usually looks like this. And the variation that they might throw at you, if they can find one, is if they stop and sit, they look like this. 2 back feet and 2 front feet in front. That means they have stopped. Whenever they're moving, it looks like this. When they stop, the front feet come in front of the back feet and give you a nice little pattern. And they asked this. This is from the Val last year. They want to know if you can tell the difference between a human and others. So I think it's an easy question. And sometimes they find bones. This is from last year. Question is, who is it? This is a beaver, but it was a small beaver, which confused me, and I got this wrong. But the question was beaver or porcupine, very similar beasts. And here they are side by side. So if you had a smaller beaver, it could be this size, but the differences are dramatic if you look. First, this is just robust. Look at how heavy everything is. This is kind of delicate, you know. He doesn't cut down trees for a living. But the biggest difference is right here, there's a hole in this skull that you could stick your finger through. There is no hole here at all. None. And finally, where's the eye? This eye, tiny on the top of the skull, so he can see when he's swimming, underwater and above too. This is just a regular eye socket. You know, it's not weird or anything, but the teeth are very familiar, and they're found in the same place. All right, and we're done, right on schedule. Any questions? Sorry to drone on like that for so long. Or any comments or anything else?
So when you have an animal, like you said, mouse, you just say mouse, are there other animals that are just, like, you obviously don't say cat.
Right.
And things like that, but is there anything besides a mouse that's just mouse and not something else? You know, more.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is, are there other questions where you don't have to be specific as to the species?
Right.
I don't know. Mouse is the big example. Another one where if you have an overlap, more in the mountains really, between elk and deer, and you find some ungulate chewing, ungulate might be the answer, because it could be either. I think, Sherry, you had a group like that, right?
Yeah, we had a rub, and it wasn't clear whether it was a big deer or a small elk. But to answer, was it Dawn? Were you asking about?
Yes.
they tell you how much you have to say. And they'll tell you too, if you know more, always write more. That won't go against you if you say which kind of mouse. If you said it was a mouse and all they were looking for was mouse, then that won't go against you if you said the wrong kind of mouse. But sometimes they'll say, you know, we want more specific detail. And when you go up with your answer, they'll ask you, well, can you give me more information because we're looking for a more specific answer?
You know,
Or
I think,
sometimes they'll just say, just give us a general answer. So they don't try and trick you that way.
Yeah, I
you know,
just
and I
being
think,
new to the area, sometimes I don't know, like, I've never seen white-tailed deer here. Are there any white-tailed deer here?
yes, but they're incredibly rare. I talked to a guy from the Forest Service. He got a picture of one on a game camera and he was so excited. They wrote up an article about it because they're not at all common. So I just write mule deer, I assume. I was looking here, I think I lost a slide somewhere in this. A deer mouse is one mouse where I think they might expect you to get it right. It's a bigger mouse, it's kind of unique. So I think that is the mouse we were looking at was much smaller. But if you go to deer mouse size, yeah, I think they might want to answer that because on the tiny mouse, there's like Western harvest mouse and house mouse, and they all look the same to me. And they used to ask that, and they decided that wasn't fair, so now they just ask mouse. But I would know the difference between the tiny mice and the deer mouse because there's size difference, and they just look different. And the deer mouse is the most common mammal in the Bosque by far. Does that help?
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, you need to know deer mouse or white-footed, whichever. All right. Let's see. So next week, same time, same place. Hopefully get the recording of this up for anybody who's waiting for it by a couple of days. It just takes a couple of days. And then next week we'll do the rest of the Bosque, everybody that's not a mammal. And then the last week will be just the mountains, just one day for the mountains because there's a lot less to come.
Thank you. It's been really helpful.
Okay.
Thanks, Michael. Really
bet.
helpful. And Sharon, appreciate
Thanks
it.
for coming.
Okie doke.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming, Peter.
Good night. Thank
I
you.
and I may send you
So
a
long.
track, Peter, I found the other day. That has,
Okay.
yeah, because I don't know. It looks small, but it looks like a mouse, or it looks just like a bobcat to me. I
Yeah.
actually brought it home. What?
Yeah. Send it.
Yeah, I just wondered, could it be a small bobcat? Yeah, I've got it right here, actually. But I'll send you a picture. It'd be easier.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
helping out.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye.